What's up, outliers? Our market recap today has grown to 3 recap today has grown to 3 items because of a request from somebody in the Discord, which I'm happy to accommodate. So today we are going to look at CWHY, we are going to look at NVDA, and we are going to look at GameStop in that order. So the reason why I want to start with CWHY is because some of the things we're going to talk about look really interesting for CWHY, but then as soon as you put it in the context of something like NVIDIA, it kind of, you'll see. So let's start off with CWHY, aka this is NVIDIA, so we have to pull up CWHY. Maybe I can click the box. There we go. Let's start off with CWHY. So as expected, CWHY started just kind of oscillating sideways into this earnings release, generally in line with expectations for me. I actually had a short strangle on it once I saw this third day, really short-term trade, but my full expectation was that we were going to start just moving sideways. So we kind of continued to see that behavior, and now today we are right before earnings, which is on the 28th. So what's been going on in here? Well, a few things. We did see volume expand pretty meaningfully over the last 3 days. So if we go back to the 23rd, volume was 4.8 mil. If we go to the 26th, 6 mil. And then if we go to the 27th, today, 7.8 mil. So lots of volume that we saw in CWHY. So why is that happening? What's going on here? My guess is mostly earnings. And we saw some options coming out that I want to take a look at that actually do pique my interest a bit because they are relatively interesting for something like CWHY. And we'll get to those in a second. But right now, they're expected to report tomorrow, and it's before the open. So these before the open style reports can be kind of interesting depending on the broader market and what things look like. If we look at historically what CWHY has done around earnings, you can see over its past several cycles, it's been a mixed bag. We had a bit of a gap up in Q1 of 24. We ran down in Q4 of 23, down again, Q3 23, down again, Q2 23, gap up, Q1 23, and so on and so forth. I'm sure you're able to continue reading to the left there. So this, from a general trading perspective for me, is an interesting one because I don't like trading volatility and stuff like this that's all over the map. It's both, I'm seeing periods where implied is being exceeded like historic post move, and then I can't identify near-term clear trends in terms of how it's behaving after the implied volatility gets beat by historic, meaning are we continuing to see positive drift and things moving to the upside? As again, I said, over the last 3 quarters, it's kind of a mixed bag. So I don't like it from a general options trading earnings perspective, but I do think that there's some interesting behavior going on in here that's worth discussing. So let's take a look at the options. And the first thing before we get into the individual options and stuff, let's take a look at the volume today. We had 96,000 calls against 44,000 puts. And the bulk is for 30 AUG. I see these 32s came in at 31,000 contracts. And then I see on the put side, the 25s came in at just 12,000. So this actually popped up on one of my scanners because these 32s were getting hammered today quite a few times. And we'll take a look at that a little bit more in depth. But what does that mean for general positioning? Well, it's tough to say because it's not a massive amount of money. So this could just be a couple medium-sized traders that are out there sharking, thinking that something's going on. I don't actually attribute a lot of the volume we saw today to any sort of institutional purchasing or anything like that necessarily. Could be some of it for sure. But it's small enough that it looks like a glorious mix of random people getting involved. That's kind of the way I look at it. And there were a couple bulk positions that were put on. So for example, I see, these aren't the 32s, by the way, these are 34s, but I'm seeing these 30 AUG expirations getting hit in multiple ways. So if I filter this really quick, and I want to just look at this upcoming series for the 30th of AUG, and I want to look at essentially the 30s to like the 35s or 36s, something like that. We'll go to the 35s and let's see kind of the tenor of what's going on here. You'll see this. So one of the things I picked up here is that at the 32s, there's some pretty big volume going on. I see 5,000 there. I see 5,000 there. Then I see 3765 here. Then I see a smattering of other numbers going on here. And what I mean by that is just other strikes that are around these options, that these appear to be singles to me. So what that means is kind of more of a directional disposition. So if we grab something like this, unusual whales, we can see a few things going on here. This is, again, just kind of looking across the board, but it's focusing on just general options activity, both bid and offer side calls and puts. But you'll see that the top of the board here are these 32s, and we see them getting hit at the offer, meaning people are buying them. Now, again, going back to what I was saying before, these 5,000 lots have become very heavily associated with the cat. And we also know the cat is in CWHY. So this would not be surprising at all to me if Roaring Kitty is playing some of this earnings release. Pure speculation. I have no idea. And the other thing that's really important for everybody to remember is that he's not the only dude that has 5,000 shares or 5,000 lots that they like to move in. The people like round numbers. One of the things that would be much easier to detect if it's the cat versus somebody else is if he did like 5,009. That would be like a calling card, because that's weird. But moving larger sizes in round lots, it's just normal. It is just normal. So this is super open to speculation, really. Like it would be so easy to argue for or against, tremendously so. Now, the one thing I can say, based on what I've seen Roaring Kitty do previously, is that he doesn't seem to buy options that expire in 3 days. I haven't seen him do a lot of that. Most of his options plays that I've seen him run tend to be a month out, give or take, which is, again, a pretty pragmatic approach to trading options, especially at the sizes that he tends to run in. So is it him? I have no idea. Could it be him? Absolutely. Now, a couple other notes, though, is that even for him, this is a relatively smaller size, but this does start to look more like his size, right? So if we say, for example, that he started phasing in the morning, I don't think I've seen him trade at this time previously. Most of what he's done, again, in the other fingerprinting I've done for him, is towards the end of the day. So whether or not this first tranche is him, super tough to say. I don't know definitively, but I do see some other interesting transactions here that definitely seem to align with standard practice for him, which is towards end of day transactions. And if you look at the size here, it's almost $500,000, which is small for him, but a really large position for just about everybody else. That is, again, if it's the cat. I don't know. I really don't know. It's super hard to say. Now, we spent a little time on the last live stream going through what his position could look like, what kind of cash could he have, depending on different scenarios. And what I do know is that if he bought into CWHY, and let's just say that he unwound his GameStop position to do so, and again, that's up for debate. I don't know. I'm just using it as a discussion point to try to understand what the account could look like. He had about like $260 or $70 million in the account. And the day that he bought CWHY, giving him like the mid price, which is about fair for 9,001,000 shares, that essentially would take up like $232 million. So all I'm highlighting is that he still has $25+ million left to play with. Does that mean that he kept some of his GME stock? Does that mean that he had more money somewhere else that he poured it in? None of that. I'm not even trying to discuss that because I don't know. But I'm just trying to give you one scenario where it could be like, this would be relatively small if that is the scenario, because we know he likes to put on some big freaking trades. But this is not tiny, right? Somebody putting on $500,000 expiring in 3 days, again, that's nuts. So that leads me to believe with some probability that it could be him. Again, I have no idea, but this is very interesting to me. Now, what we do know is those options are going to do something tomorrow. Whether it's good or bad, something's going to happen. So if we take a look at these 32s, which are about a 20 delta, which again, based on the cat's fingerprinting that I've done, which is fallible. I don't know him inside and out, but I did take a look pretty in depth at his previous options trades to better understand kind of like his behaviors. And 20 delta is a little bit light for what I've seen him do historically. Typically, it's like a 30 delta, something around there. But again, this still very well could be within the realm of possibility. So yeah, it is a really interesting series of trades that I see going on. The volume today in that expiration was wild, 31,000 contracts. So what that also tells me is that this is not just the cat if it's him. This is more people. And if it's not the cat, it's a ton of other people. Because even if we attribute, these larger block trades to him, and let's say that he could have built up 15, 20,000 of this, that still means probably 15, 20,000 would be other people. So that's much larger even on the residual than all of these others. So people are building into these calls heavy, really heavy. And then when I look at the volume on the put side, it's nowhere near what we're seeing on the call side. So it tells me that in general, the options market is playing this to the upside. Now, how informed it is or how indicative it is, I don't really know. But I thought that this was a really interesting call out. Happy to take a look at it. It is going to be something to follow tomorrow. That's without a doubt. And this is kind of the fun part about earnings is I know that there's other theories right now about FTD cycles and stuff with respect to CWHY, but honestly, that could be in play here. I'm not discounting it, but what we're seeing here is dominated, in my opinion, by options, and specifically with respect to earnings. I've looked at previous CWHY earnings, this here, and this is kind of common to see this expansion in volume, this expansion in options activity around the product, at least recently. So if there is an FTD cycle that happens to coincide with the good earnings, look out above. I mean, it can start flying. I have no idea. TBD. We'll find out tomorrow morning, not too long. All right, next we have to take a look at NVIDIA again, and it's because this is the story right now. Everybody is fascinated by what happens with NVIDIA, myself included. And again, the same exact pattern, this sideways trend into earnings, quieting down, daily ranges contracting. If we take a look at the 5-day ATR, average true range, which is including gaps, or if we want to isolate it down to the ADR, which is probably even better, we can see that the 5-day ADR is now down to 4.3%, whereas the 20-day was over 6%. So it's just gotten way quiet intraday. Relative, still moving for sure, but relative quiet. And the big thing about NVIDIA is that it makes up a lot of the market. It's everywhere. It's in the semiconductors ETFs, which are going to be highly dependent on what happens here. It's in the S&P 500 as a pretty big percentage, almost 10%. It's in the Qs also. So it's like, this is going to be a really important release, and it's wild to say, but we have one stock that can move the whole market right now. And that is not being hyperbolic, which I was practicing yesterday. Hopefully I'm getting better at it so that I can rake in all the views. I realized that I got to get more hyperbolic in my speech in order to get my rep up. So that's about as hyperbolic as I get. But it's honestly not even a hyperbole. Like, this really can move the entire market by itself. So if we take a look at the options, and I want to show you why I wanted to start with CWHY, because we're talking about cool stuff, right? We're talking about $500,000 position. And then if you grab NVIDIA, it's just like, you don't even get below $1 million until you, hold on. Let's see how far we have to scroll. You have to get down here before you drop below $1 million. The top position is a $10 million position. So it's just a different scale. It's just different. And this, I absolutely believe, is an earnings play. It's just a smart earnings play because they're going far out in time and they're going deep in the money. This is an institution, clearly. This is somebody who knows what they're doing, that are really trying to position for an explosive upward movement, hopefully for them, because this is it's a huge position, bro. And there's a possibility that this is the same person, because we have the 80s being hit pretty close to one another at size and then some. And I mean, this easily could be $20 million position that you're looking at right here from somebody just looking to run this thing up. It will be just fascinating, because if you want to talk about money moving, this is it, man. This is some of the most money you can find in an intraday or in a daily basis of an options chain that's not like a big index itself. If you're looking at SPX and stuff like that, they're typically pretty large. But NVIDIA here this is just wild, man. Like this is tens of millions of dollars just today, literally just today. So if we take a look at the positioning as we get into, oh my God, look at that. Just, man, it's lit up like a Christmas tree. All of this green means that it's net adds over yesterday in terms of the volume. And then if you look at the volume today, it's massive new volume blowing up again. 35,000 here, 20,000 here, 53,000 here, 38,000 here. Like, this is just massive positioning. 61,000 here, 43,000, 85,000. So there is just massive build out happening right now in this product, which is just honestly kind of fun to see this much money moving. This is a massive amount of money that's flowing through here. And if you take a look at the volume just today, 1.4 million calls against 886,000 puts. And earnings in here is not until after the close tomorrow, which is also interesting. There's a really good chance that I will try to play this directionally, almost because I don't know how you can't. It's just that interesting to me. We have some really big put transactions, 16,850 of these 90 puts. So this is obviously some sort of hedging activity for probably somebody that I imagine has a big old stock position that they're looking to hold through the release. I mean, just an incredible amount of money moving into here. So for this upcoming expiration cycle, 708,000 against 423,000 volume. Calls to puts respectively. Open interest right now just for this expiration cycle is 1 million calls against 921,000 puts. So not a clear disparity here yet. I think we need to see the volume from today get integrated into the OI before coming up with any firm decisions there. But yeah, tomorrow's going to be interesting because from a general market perspective, it's kind of quiet. There's not a whole lot. I think there's a Fed speaker. If we take a look really quick, we can see what's happened. Yeah, so for the 28th, we have crude oil inventories and Bostic is speaking. So it's like not a whole lot. Crude oil's semi-topical now, but like not massively big. So it's kind of all eyes on NVIDIA. And then the crowd favorite, the hometown favorite, the mascot, GameStop. And another down day. So kind of have to expect it at this point. Again, it's still marking earnings right now for the 4th of September. And actually in a video that I did, because a lot of people based on the video yesterday, they're like, yo, what do you think about earnings maybe not being on the 4th, which is actually one of the hypotheses I came up on Sunday. I talked about that there because when I'm looking at the implied volatility in here, this still doesn't line up to me. We are seeing this vol stand up for the 6th SEP a little bit, but the fact that this is still 78 to 96% in 13 SEP, one of my underlying hypothesis right now is still that earnings might move. The reason why I'm not fully confident in that is because like we're coming up on time here, right? So the 4th is next Wednesday. We're essentially a week out. You can't wait forever before you actually confirm when your earnings is going to be released. So I can't help but find that a little intriguing, but it does look like there's a pretty significant discrepancy here. So if it does move, it wouldn't surprise me. But if it does move, I would also expect that to happen soon. Because again, we are coming up on time here. Now, the last thing when I was looking at GameStop, I was taking a look at the open interest, which this is now starting to contract a little bit. So for total calls, there's 550,000 against 273,000 puts. So this is now moving away from the 2-to-1 ratio that I typically like to see in something like this. So my overall idea here is the same as it's been. My guess is we are going to be relatively quiet into earnings. That's my guess. If we take a look at this front expiration, It's 114,000 calls against 26,000 puts. So still massive call skew in the front expirations, but it's just not that much. So relatively quiet from an options front. Now, when I look at the chart here, again, this down move is kind of continued. You can see the levels I'm interested in. I think that we offer at least a first look at some level of support where it's kind of bumping up to here, coming up on 2035-ish, something like that. And then below that, there's a longer term volume node that I'm anchoring this off of, kind of this value gap. And it's starting to coincide with the 200-day moving average. So we have to see if GameStop grabs a footing here. Now, for me, a couple other breadth indicators that I don't love is the RSI, both moving average and RSI itself have now tucked below the 50 line, which is kind of bullish bearish separator on a broad scale. And we also have the, let me zoom this up for you. You can see that the RSI is now kind of peaked below, negative sloping below the EMA, which in this case, I'm using a 4-day EMA, which is pretty fast. So it does look like a bit of negative momentum here. From a volume perspective, it's still quiet out there, 4 million shares. So a little bit higher than the 5-day average, still below the 20. And it looks like some sideways action, slight downtrend leading into the earnings release or until we have another catalyst, whatever that looks like. So that's what it's looking like today. There's no live stream later today because I'm doing a podcast that I'm lining up with somebody on a different time zone, so I have to consume the later time. But as always, anything you want me to take a look at, let me know. Hit me up. Be an outlier. I'll see you guys later.